Hello. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 2 of the Kybalion. Before I begin, I just want to offer a disclaimer. I apologize if I mispronounce any words. Also, this may not necessarily be a straight read through of Chapter 2. If a thought pops in my mind, I may interject. Probably not, but the possibility is there. So if you're looking for a straight reading of Chapter 2 of the Kybalion, this is not it. I'm letting you know in advance. Okay, let's learn together. I've read the Kybalion one time, many years ago, so I am indeed a student. Okay, let's get started on Chapter 2 of the Kybalion. The 7 Hermetic Principles. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The Kybalion. The 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1. The principle of mentalism. 2. The principle of correspondence. 3. The principle of vibration. 4. The principle of polarity. 5. The principle of rhythm. 6. The principle of cause and effect. 7. The principle of gender. These 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may as well be given at this point. 1. The principle of mentalism. Quote, the all is mind. The universe is mental. End quote. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in its parts or units has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without such explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws, instead of using them in a haphazard manner. With the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all these are subordinate to the mastery of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote, long ages ago, quote, he who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery. And these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. 2. The principle of correspondence. Quote, as above, so below. As below, so above. End quote. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran in these words, quote, as above, so below, as below, so above, end quote. And the grasping of this principle gives one the means of solving many a dark paradox and hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. This principle is of universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe. It is an universal law. The ancient Hermetists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. 3. The principle of vibration. Quote, nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. End quote. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, nothing is at rest. Facts which modern science endorses and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. From the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter, all is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position in the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest, just as a rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale, there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low as to seem at rest. Between these poles, there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration. From corpuscle and electron, atom and molecule, to worlds and universes, everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even on to the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle, with the appropriate formulas, enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. The masters also apply this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena in various ways. Quote, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, end quote, says one of the old writers. 4. The principle of polarity. Quote, everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. End quote. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual. Everything has two poles, everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antitheses are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time. All truths are but half-truths. Every truth is half false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc. It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, heat and cold, although, quote, opposites, are really the same thing, the differences consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms heat and cold simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing. And that same thing, which manifests as heat and cold, is merely a form, variety, and rate of vibration. So heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat. And the phenomena attendant thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example, that of love and hate. Two mental states apparently totally different. And yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the terms like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing, as you will see if you will but think a moment. And, more than this, and considered of more importance by the Hermetists, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love, in one's own mind and in the minds of others. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse, in your own case and that of others. And you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing, and the Hermetist understands the art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy, known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity, as well as that of others, if he will devote the time and study necessary to master the art. 5. The principle of rhythm. Quote, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. End quote. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. And it is with this latter that the Hermetists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermetists have grasped this principle, finding its universal application, and have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of the appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending on the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consist the art of the Hermetists. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously, but the master does this consciously, and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses who are swung backward and forward like a pendulum. This principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermetists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. 6. The principle of cause and effect. Quote, every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. End quote. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing ever merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermetists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by other wills and environment. They use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule on their own plane. In this statement, there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can. 7. The principle of gender. Quote, gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. End quote. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, or this great principle, within it, him or her. Every male thing has the female element also. Every female contains also the male principle. If you would understand the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, generation, and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teachings, and practices which are taught under fanciful titles and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient, infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul, and the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend toward lust, licentiousness, and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along these lines. To the pure, all things are pure. To the base, all things are base. Okay. Let's go through some of the things that I underlined. Please feel free to contribute your thoughts and impressions on the summary of the 7 principles. Okay. Well, the first principle, the principle of mentalism. We are in the mind of the all. I'm assuming that the all is source, right? The creator. The creator who, as it's written here, or they refer to source as spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the phenomenal world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the laws of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in its parts or units has its existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. So that's interesting. This is an interesting image. We are in the mind of the all. This makes me think, well, we're characters, and they do mention the game of life later on. We are characters in this game of life within the mind of the all. At the same time, this, just saying that we are simply characters in the mind of the all, it almost implies that we have no control, but we are indeed creators, as is mentioned later on. about being the causes rather than the effects. Let's see here. Yes, right here. Under the principle of cause and effect. The Hermetists understand the art and methods of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect to a certain degree. And by mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects. Movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by other wills and environment. And I wrote in the margins in regards to that, sovereignty, being conscious creators. That this is the first principle, the principle of mentalism, that the all is mind, the universe is mental. This is significant. This is a mind game. The game of life is a mind game. It says here, this principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all these are subordinate to the mastery of mind. Mastery of mind. Mastering our thoughts. And I highlight it here. He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery. Path to mastery. And this is a timeless principle, as it goes on to say. And these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple. Okay, let's move on to the second principle, the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The Kybalion. What did I highlight here? Paradox. And hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would otherwise be unknowable to us. And I think that you, in fact, experience this, right? I often say, as within, so without. That is the principle of correspondence. So knowing these principles, such as the principle of correspondence, yes, it helps us. It's like pattern recognition. It helps us understand, grasp the unknowable to a certain degree. Now, they do mention here monad. Okay, let me just read some of this here. Okay. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel. I do not know what monad is. Shall we look it up? I've heard the word before, but never really looked into it in detail. Okay. In spiritual contexts, a monad represents the essential unity of existence, symbolizing both individuality and interconnectedness. Okay, the individual and the collective. Let's go on. Okay, symbolizing both individuality and the individual and the whole. Okay, the part and the whole. Symbolizing both individuality and interconnectedness within the universe. Definition and significance. The term monad originates from the Greek word monas, meaning unity or one. In spiritual philosophy, it signifies the fundamental essence of being, representing both the individual self and its connection to the greater whole. Okay. The monad embodies the idea that while each individual is unique, they are also part of a larger spiritual tapestry that connects all beings. Okay. Spiritual implications. 1. Unity and interconnectedness. The monad symbolizes the ultimate unity of existence, illustrating how every person and experience contributes to a larger spiritual reality. Recognizing oneself as part of a monad fosters a deeper understanding of interdependence, enhancing compassion and empathy towards others. Okay. Number 2, individuality. While the monad represents unity, it also preserves individuality. Each monad can be seen as a distinct note in a grand symphony, where every note is crucial yet unique. 3. Personal growth. Embracing the concept of the monad encourages self-exploration and personal development. Understanding one's place within the monad can lead to a more meaningful life and a deeper connection to the universe. Okay. All right. Let's see if I highlighted anything. Okay. Under the third principle, the principle of vibration. What did I underline here? Manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. Yes. The principle of vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration. I also highlighted here, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power. And that makes me think of the famous Nikola Tesla quote. I have it here on my desk. I probably mentioned it in a previous video. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Okay, the principle of polarity. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. All truths are but half-truths. Two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. Vibrations. I highlighted in red ink here. Light and darkness, which are the same thing. The difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. And in regards to the example of love and hate, two mental states apparently totally different, and yet they exist on the same spectrum, varying by degrees of vibration. It says here, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the terms like or dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing. making me think, yes, about the illusion of separation, right? All are simply degrees of the same thing at varying rates of vibration. And it says right here, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love. And it goes on to say, and I'm sure you can relate to it, we can all relate to this. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate. Same spectrum, varying degrees of vibration, right? There's no chasm between the two. There's no separation. Let me read it again. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary rapid transition from love to hate and the reverse in your own case and that of others. And you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing. And the Hermetist understands the art of transmuting evil into good, changing one form into another. The art of transmuting evil into good by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy. The universe is mental. The path to mastery. Mastering your thoughts, your mental processes. Okay. The fifth principle, the principle of rhythm. I highlighted here the mental law of neutralization. You are likely learning this. Learning to be more neutral, not getting overly involved, entangled, especially in drama. You are able to pull back and just observe. To be more neutral, non-judgmental, just observing quietly. The master of Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less unconsciously. But the master does this consciously, and I believe this is what you're doing now, more and more often. Realizing that you are a conscious creator. That you are sovereign. But the master does this consciously and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses, who are swung back and forth like a pendulum. Now, they use the word will, but the master does this consciously by the use of his will. Okay, I prefer to use the words awareness or consciousness. To me, the word will implies forcing, pushing. Okay, let's move on to the sixth principle, the principle of cause and effect. Okay, this principle, let's see. Well, I underline no such thing as chance. Yes, there is a divine order to things. Nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The law of cause and effect. And this portion here, I really like it. Use red ink and blocked it out. Okay, this part here. By mentally rising to a higher plane, they become causers instead of effects, being conscious creators, being the ripple in ripple effect. You are the ripple. By raising your vibration through your consciousness, through your vibration, you are the ripple. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves. Heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising to the plane above, higher consciousness, higher vibration, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them through your vibration, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by other wills and environments. They use the principle instead of being its tools. Again, yes, I already said this. Sovereignty. You know you are sovereign. You are a conscious creator in this game of life, the chessboard of life. You know how the game is played. You are becoming master. You are becoming a master. Okay, the seventh principle. Okay, I didn't highlight anything here, but yes, the principle of gender. Gender is in everything, making me think of the yin-yang symbol. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. Yes. Okay. All right. Wow, over 40 minutes, but let's just see what comes out. Let's do a short. Hopefully it'll be a short reading. See what comes out. Big dreams, planning, visualization, the Two of Wands. The Eight of Wands, alignment, swift action, fast movement. Wow, lots of Wands energy, lots of fire, passion, enthusiasm, inspiration. We have the Four of Wands, home, security, stability, ceremony. My goodness. Queen of Wands, passionate, inspirational, warm. Oh my goodness, wonderful. Passion, fire. Okay, now we have a Swords energy. Okay, Five of Swords. Confrontation, grudges, disloyalty. Mastering your mind. Okay, now we have the Nine of Pentacles. Self-sufficiency, prosperity, luxury. feeling more stable within. Mastering your emotions, your thoughts, feeling more stable within. We have Page of Pentacles, studious, practical, grounded focus. Yes, this makes me think you are very much, you have a learner's mindset. And we have Ace of Wands, new beginnings and growth, sowing seeds, passionate new beginnings. Momentum is building. Choosing wisely, reality versus illusion, Seven of Cups. Opportunities to use your discernment, to exercise your mental acuity, balancing, thinking about the principle of gender, your masculine and feminine energies. More Wands energy. Wow. Okay. Three of Wands now. Holding the vision. Ships coming in. Page of Swords. Innovative, insightful, logical. Yep. Very intelligent. Very intelligent. Lots of youthful energy here too with the pages. Beginner's mindset. Learning new things. Looking optimistically into the future. And we have Judgment. Spiritual awakening, redemption, karma. Your redemption story. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. More Wands, Knight of Wands. Okay. Passionate new beginnings indeed. Yeah, Knight of Wands. Passionate energy, adventure, enthusiasm, forward movement. Passion and stability, King of Pentacles. Just confirmation. We already saw the Page of Swords. We see it again in this different deck. And Four of Wands again. Confirmation. Four of Wands. More security, stability, ceremony, happy family, happy home. Okay, I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much. Take care.